welcome to your personalized deep dive. So you're looking to level up your business communication, huh?
Mhm.
Especially when things get a little tricky and you need to, find that compromise. We can help with that.
You sent over this episode, Master Compromise Phrases. Seriously, some of this stuff is amazing. Like, anyone who has ever felt stuck in a negotiation or a tough conversation, this is for them.
I know, right?
Mhm.
I was thinking about how differently a meeting last week could have gone if I'd known about this voice architecture. What even is that?
Well, the episode starts off with this really cool idea. It says that compromise, it isn't about like winning or losing. It's more like a dance, like carefully choreographed. They even tell this story about a startup CEO in San Francisco. She was about to lose a huge investment, and just by like changing how she talked, turned it into $1 million deal.
Okay, that got my attention. So not about giving in, but more like using the right words to guide the conversation.
Yeah, exactly. And they break down like specific phrases, techniques that can make a huge difference. They compare it to like learning a new language, the language of opportunity, they call it. Like, say you're in a tough spot negotiating with a supplier. Instead of saying, we need you to lower your prices, which, puts people on the defensive.
Yeah.
You could try, I wonder if we could explore some creative solutions together.
Whoa, that changes everything. It's like so much more inviting. It's like instead of, you better give me what I want, it's more like, hey, let's work together on this.
Totally. It shifts the whole thing from like a demand to an invitation. And they say these techniques, they can be used everywhere, not just big negotiations. Project deadlines, disagreements on a team, even just finding a meeting time.
See, this is what I love about these deep dives.
Yeah.
They're so useful.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got this more invitational language, but you mentioned something about language landmarks. What are those?
Oh, yeah. These are phrases, but they're like, memorable, the kind that can get people on the same page. So instead of that generic, let's find a compromise, which no one really likes.
Yeah, it's kind of blah.
They suggest something like, let's create a solution that works for everyone.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
It's way more inspiring. Less like we're all losing something and more like we're building something, together. What other kind of phrases do they recommend?
One that stood out was this idea of embedded suggestions. It's like instead of just saying what you want, you kind of plant the idea subtly. For example, instead of, here's what I propose, you could say, as we think about different approaches, one option might be.
Oh, sneaky. But in a good way, I guess.
Yeah.
You're guiding them without them even realizing it.
Exactly. And then there's this thing, future pacing. It's like instead of getting stuck in the disagreement you have now, you move the conversation to what good things will happen if you do agree. Like, imagine 6 months from now when this solution has helped us both achieve.
Whoa, that's powerful. You're taking the focus off the problem and putting it on the possibilities. I could see how that would get people on board. So we've got these phrases. But the episode also mentions strategic questions. What's that all about?
Have you ever, had someone ask you a question that just totally changed how you thought about something?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
It's kind of like that. It's not just about getting information. It's about, leading the conversation in a certain direction.
So instead of saying something like, don't you think we should?
Yeah.
Which can be a bit, confrontational.
Yeah.
You could ask, what would make this solution work for your team?
Exactly. It shows you're actually interested in what they think, that you value their input. It just creates a better atmosphere, more collaborative.
All this talk about language is making me want to, rewrite my whole vocabulary. But the episode goes beyond just words, right? It talks about how our voice plays a role, too.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And this is where it gets super interesting. They introduce this idea of voice architecture.
Voice architecture. Okay, now let's take notes. Tell me more.
They talk about using your pitch, how fast you talk, and the power in your voice, all strategically, to influence how your compromise suggestions come across.
Okay, hold on. So how do we actually do that? Where do we even start?
And they give this example of a CFO, super experienced. She's in this tense budget meeting, right? And just by how she uses her voice, she changes, let's explore alternative approaches, from this dreaded statement to something that sounds, new and exciting.
That's wild. But how do we do it? With this voice architecture thing, what's the first step?
Well, when you're making a suggestion, start a little higher in your pitch. It signals openness, possibility. Then, as you explain the details, gradually bring it down. Creates a natural flow.
So it's I'm painting with my voice, leading people toward a win-win. I like it. What about how fast we talk? Does that matter too?
Absolutely. You have to master the strategic pause. Think about those negotiators, ones. They have a sense of when to just let the silence hang there. They're not rushing. They're using those pauses to make their points hit harder.
Yeah. It's like giving your words space to breathe.
Yeah.
See how that would be effective. Okay, what about that power part? Does that mean we have to talk super loud, forceful?
No, not at all. It's more about conveying that you're confident, certain, but without being aggressive. Think about when you're sharing good news, your voice just naturally has that energy. That's what you want to bring to the table when you're suggesting a compromise.
Got it. So when I say, what if we considered, it shouldn't sound hesitant.
Yeah.
It needs that energy. I really believe in it.
Yes, exactly. It's about that confidence, even when it's just a suggestion.
Okay, starting to click now. I see how these voice techniques, they can make a huge difference.
Yeah.
But the episode goes even further, right? It talks about how to adapt all this for different cultures.
Oh, yeah. That's a whole other level. Because what works amazing in one culture might completely backfire in another.
Oh, for sure. Can you give me an example of how that, plays out in business?
They tell the story about a tech executive. She's leading a global product launch, right?
Mm.
And she realizes she can't just translate her compromise phrases directly. She has to adapt her whole approach to how each team communicates.
Yeah, that makes sense. Different cultures have completely different ways of dealing with conflict, negotiation. How do we navigate that? What are the key things we need to keep in mind?
The episode talks about cultural wavelengths. Basically, each culture has its own preference for how compromise should be presented. In North America, saying, "What if we tried?" often comes across as collaborative.
But that might not be the case everywhere.
Nope. In some Asian business contexts, it's more about a shared journey. So instead of jumping to the suggestion, you might say, "Perhaps we could consider," and then allow for some silence.
It's like those pauses we talked about, but amplified by culture. I'm starting to see it's not just the words, it's the whole package. How we say them, when we say them, who we're saying them to.
Exactly. And the episode introduces this technique. They call it cultural bracketing.
Cultural bracketing. Okay, that sounds cool. Tell me more.
It's like creating a safety zone around your suggestions by, acknowledging the bigger cultural context. So before you suggest something, you might say, understanding the importance of consensus in this situation.
Ah, so you're acknowledging their values before you jump in with your idea.
Right. It shows you get it, you get their perspective, and that can make them a lot more open to what you have to say.
This is like a secret code book for cross-cultural communication. Are there other types of phrases that can help with this?
Definitely. They call them cultural bridge phrases. These are compromise suggestions that are designed to work across cultures. So instead of saying, "Let's split the difference," which can feel, transactional.
Yeah, just cutting a deal.
You might say, "How might we create a solution that honors everyone's priorities?"
Oh, that's a good one. It shifts it from just a deal to something more, like everyone working together towards a common goal.
Exactly. It creates a space where all those different cultural approaches to compromise can coexist.
This is blowing my mind a little. It's making me totally rethink how I approach communication, especially when I'm working with people from different cultures.
And we haven't even gotten to timing yet. The episode dedicates a whole section to that. How to deliver these culturally tuned suggestions with perfect timing.
Oh, timing. That's huge in any communication, but yeah, I bet it's even more important across cultures. Tell me about it. What are those perfectly timed moments?
The episode makes this analogy to surfing. You got to read the waves of the conversation and catch them at just the right moment.
I love that. So how do we become expert compromise surfers? What are some timing tips we should know?
They talk about 4 golden moments to make compromise suggestions. And these seem to hold true across cultures.
Okay, lay it on me. What are these golden moments?
The first one is when someone's frustrated, but they haven't totally dug in their heels yet, catching a wave when it's forming, not when it's about to crash. Address the concern early, and they might be way more open to different options.
That makes sense. You want to address it before it becomes a fixed position. Okay, that's golden moment number 1. What's next?
The second one, it's after someone's fully explained their position. It's your chance to use that echo and suggest thing we were talking about.
Right. Show them you heard them before you throw out your idea.
Yeah.
Simple but effective. Right.
Super effective. Imagine your colleague is totally set on a tight deadline. Instead of like fighting them on it, you could say, I hear how important that timeline is to you. What if we tried a phased approach? It could even like speed up those key milestones.
Okay, yeah, I see how that works. You're validating them, but also kind of sneaking in a solution that could benefit everyone. Clever. What about the other two golden moments?
The third one, they call it pre-compromise positioning. Basically, you're setting the stage for compromise from the very beginning, even before any conflict comes up.
Oh, interesting. So like setting the expectation that we're all here to find a solution, not just, battle it out.
Exactly. Think of phrases like, as we explore different possibilities or keeping all options open. They subtly create that space for compromise.
It's like you're saying, hey, we're all in this together. Let's find something that works. What about the last golden moment?
This one might surprise you. It's right after you've been like really strong in advocating for your own position. They call it the strategic retreat.
Wait, really? Why would that be a good time for compromise?
Okay, picture this. You've laid out your argument and the other person is like totally digging in. Then you say, well, this is important to us. I wonder if there's a way to incorporate elements of both our visions.
Whoa. It's like you're saying, okay, I made my point, but I'm still willing to be flexible.
Yeah. It can totally change the whole vibe. Make them more open to hearing you out.
Definitely adding that to my toolbox. Okay, so those are the 4 golden moments. But the episode mentions other timing strategies too, right?
Tons, like momentum matching. You know those meetings that just go in circles and everyone's getting nowhere?
Oh, yeah. The worst.
That's your chance to jump in. Offer a suggestion that feels like a natural next step, a way to get things unstuck.
Makes sense. You're redirecting that energy towards a solution. Any other timing tips?
Definitely. Especially for virtual meetings, silence leverage. People freak out about silence online, but you can actually use it to let those compromise suggestions, really sink in.
The power of the pause. Again, don't be afraid of a little silence, especially after you make a key suggestion.
Exactly. It gives them time to think. Process what you've said. And while we're on virtual meetings, the episode mentions this cool technique called layered suggestions.
Layered suggestions. Okay, what's that?
Instead of hitting them with the whole suggestion at once, you kind of introduce it in pieces throughout the conversation. So by the time you get to the full proposal, it feels, more familiar.
Ah, so you're easing them into it. I like it.
Yeah, it's much less jarring. And then there's one more timing strategy that can be super effective, especially in those really high-stakes negotiations. Pressure release timing.
Pressure release timing. Okay, now I'm really curious.
It's like recognizing that moment when everyone realizes, oh man, if this fails, it's going to be bad. And then you come in with the solution that lets everyone save face.
So you're the hero, saving the day.
Right. And they give all these real-world examples of how these perfectly timed suggestions, they've taken situations that were about to go south and turned them into total successes.
Oh, I love a good story. What were some of the examples they gave?
Well, there was this one about a software launch that was like completely off the rails. Total different priorities, everyone fighting. The project manager used this thing they called Cascade Compromise. Got everyone to agree to small things that eventually, built up to a solution everyone could live with.
Cascade Compromise. Catchy. It's like one thing leads to another, and before you know it, everyone's on board. What other stories did they tell?
Oh, there was this one with a client service manager dealing with a super demanding client. He used this mirror and extend approach. Basically, he matched the client's, urgency and then took it a step further, offering a solution that not only solved the immediate problem, but also, strengthened the whole relationship.
Smart. You're not just putting out fires, you're using it as a chance to build something better. Any others?
There was a great one about this multinational team meeting that was about to explode. Totally different cultures, tons of misunderstandings. The team leader turned it all around using this bridge building cascade of culturally sensitive compromise suggestions.
It's like all these techniques, they can apply to so many different situations.
Yeah.
And the episode actually gives specific phrases for each, right?
Oh, tons of them. They even had ones that had been used in huge merger negotiations to ease tensions.
Wow, they thought of everything.
Hmm.
Okay, starting to see how this can be applied at all levels of business.
And it goes beyond just, conflict. They gave an example of how a team leader revived a struggling international team using what they called a trust-building trilogy of phrases, all focused on shared goals, respect, and open communication.
You're not just fixing a problem, you're creating a better working environment for everyone.
Exactly. And one of the coolest examples was this sales director who used a future focus flip to save $1 million deal that was about to fall apart.
Future focus flip. Tell me more. That sounds intriguing.
The deal was stuck on price. The client just wouldn't budge. So instead of focusing on that impasse, the sales director shifted the conversation to like the long-term value, how the investment would pay off down the line.
Oh, that's smart. You're taking their focus off the immediate cost and putting it on the future benefits. And do they have any examples about, like, customer relationships?
Oh, for sure. There was this one about a customer service team. They used what they called the empathy escalator to turn this angry client into like a total fan.
Empathy escalator. We talked about that before, right? Where you basically, like, keep upping the empathy until the situation calms down.
Yep. That's the one. And in this case, every suggestion they made, it was layered with empathy. It wasn't just about fixing the problem. It was about connecting with the client.
Wow, that's really powerful. You're turning a negative experience into a positive one.
Exactly. And that's one of the big points the episode makes. These techniques, they're not just about getting what you want. It's about building relationships, creating an environment where everyone can thrive.
I'm starting to see how mastering this could, like, change my whole approach to communication. But let's get practical. They gave specific tools in the episode, right? Stuff listeners can use, like, right away.
Tons. And there's so much. We'll hit some key ones you can apply to your business communication.
Perfect. Hit me with them. What's first?
They have this framework they call the Compromise Compass to help you choose the right type of suggestion for any situation.
Compromise compass. I like it. Does it come with a cool vintage map?
Maybe not a literal compass, but it's a mental model. Helps you like assess the situation, figure out the best approach, even when things are getting heated.
Okay, so how does this compromise compass actually work?
It helps you ask the right questions, like what are the priorities here? What are the potential roadblocks? What kind of compromise would actually be good for everyone? It guides you toward the smartest move.
It's like a GPS for tricky conversations. Okay, what other tools did they highlight?
They talk about phrase layering. It's like building a gourmet meal instead of just, serving up fast food.
Okay, I'm intrigued. How do we layer our phrases? What does that actually look like?
Instead of jumping right to the suggestion, you build up to it with a series of phrases. Like, you might start by acknowledging their perspective. Something like, I've been thinking about the points you raised.
So you're showing them that you've actually listened before you present your own ideas. What's next?
Then you introduce the possibility of a solution. You might say, what if we explored a solution that opens the door for collaboration?
You're planting that seed.
Yeah.
And what's the final layer?
You want to end with something that reinforces the benefits of working together. Like, this approach could help us both achieve. Or, I think we can find a solution that benefits everyone.
Really emphasizes that win-win. I love this phrase layering idea. What else?
There's the empathy escalator we talked about. But it's not just for customer service. You can use it in any tough conversation where, things are getting emotional.
Right. Layering on that empathy and understanding helps bring things back down to earth.
Did they give any tools for, like, structuring our approach to compromise? Oh, yeah, they had one they called the Bridge Building Blueprint, a whole system for creating solid compromise suggestions.
Bridge building blueprint. Love it. Tell me everything.
It starts with understanding. Phrases like, I see the value in your perspective. Then you add support with possibility phrases like, what if we considered? And finally, top it off with collaboration phrases that invite them to problem solve with you. Things like, how could we work together to...
This is so clear. It's like a step-by-step guide to building win-win solutions.
Do they have any advice on, like, choosing the right phrases for different situations?
Definitely. They talked about understanding what they called the diplomatic voltage of different phrases.
Diplomatic voltage. Okay, now I'm picturing like a control panel with dials and levers. What does that even mean?
It's about recognizing that some phrases, they carry more weight than others, and knowing when to use them.
So some phrases are like high voltage power lines, and others are more like gentle currents. Exactly, like a phrase like, I have a suggestion that might solve everything. Can sound a bit, arrogant if you use it at the wrong time.
Whereas something like, I wonder if there might be, is more open, more exploratory. So it's about matching the phrase to the voltage. What else?
They talked about the accordion technique. It's all about flexibility.
Accordion technique sounds like there's a lot of expanding and contracting involved. How does that work in a conversation?
You adjust based on how they respond. So you might start broad, like there might be several ways to approach this. Then, based on their reaction, you either give more detail or simplify your proposal.
So you're tailoring it as you go. That's cool. What other techniques are there?
The echo and enhance technique, we touched on that with the golden moments. It's
Yeah.
about turning objections into like opportunities to collaborate.
Right. Hearing their concern and then offering something that builds on it. It's like saying, I hear you, and here's how we can make this work for both of us.
Exactly. Turning resistance into like a creative problem-solving session. And then there's this idea of the diplomatic domino effect.
Okay, that sounds strategic. What's the domino effect?
It's about getting those small agreements one after another that build up to something bigger. Find common ground on something small, then use that to move on to the next issue, and so on.
Like a domino rally. One tiny push can set off a whole chain reaction.
Right. And it can be really effective for like overcoming resistance. You break a big problem into smaller, easier to manage steps.
Okay, this is all super helpful. But what about when you're hitting a wall? You know, even after trying all these techniques, the episode talks about that too, right?
They do. They introduce something called the resilience loop.
Resilience loop. Sounds essential, especially when you're dealing with, like, difficult people. What's involved?
It's a cycle of acknowledge their resistance, reframe your suggestion, and then resuggest it in a way that addresses their concerns. Basically, don't give up at the first no.
So persistence and adaptability.
Yeah. The episode even compares it to dancing. You're leading, but you're also following, always adjusting to your partner's moves.
Love that analogy. Makes it seem more, fluid. Okay, so we've got all these tools.
Tons of them. A whole section on practical stuff you can do to make these skills like second nature.
Let's hear it. What's the first one we should know about?
They start with the mirror practice. We've mentioned it a couple of times.
Right. Practice those phrases in the mirror. I know it sounds kind of silly, but I'm willing to try anything. What's the point of doing that?
Self-awareness. Watching yourself, you become more aware of like your facial expressions, your body language, making sure everything is, aligned.
Like a built-in feedback loop. Makes sense. What's next?
The scenario rotation exercise. This one's all about perspective taking.
Perspective taking. That feels like a superpower. How do we practice that?
Think of 3 tough situations you face at work. Could be anything, a demanding client, team disagreements, you name it.
Okay, 3 tricky scenarios. Got it. Then what?
Now here's the twist. Practice coming up with compromise suggestions for each, but from 3 different perspectives. First, as if you're the one in charge.
So I'm putting on my leadership hat, trying to find the best solution for everyone.
Exactly. Then switch it up. Imagine you're the one being challenged, the one pushing back.
So I'm putting myself in their shoes. That's a great way to, build empathy. What's the third perspective?
The neutral mediator. Someone who's just trying to help everyone get to a good outcome.
This is such a cool exercise. You're forced to see all sides of the situation.
Yeah. The episode actually shares an example of a team leader who used this to get through a really tough meeting. He practiced beforehand, so he was ready for whatever objections people threw at him.
Preparation is key. What's the next exercise?
Phrase progression practice. This one helps you get fluent in the language of compromise.
Phrase progression.
Yeah.
So basically, practicing different phrases, getting comfy using them.
Pretty much. It's like learning a musical instrument. You don't start with like a concerto.
Right, you gotta start with the basics.
Exactly. Start with simple ones like, what if we practice them in different scenarios? Then, once you feel good, move on to more complex ones, like building on our shared goal of perhaps we could explore.
Gradually leveling up. I like it.
And the cool thing is, as you do this, the phrases start to feel more natural. It's like you're building muscle memory for good communication.
This is great. It's a way to make these techniques, part of who you are as a communicator. What's next?
The response readiness drill. This
Yeah.
is about anticipating how people might react to your suggestions.
Response readiness. That's crucial, especially when you're dealing with, tough negotiators. How do we practice for that?
Think of some of your go-to compromise phrases, and then imagine 3 responses: positive, negative, and neutral.
Okay, I'm picturing it. Someone's totally on board, someone shuts it down, and someone's like,
Right.
maybe.
Exactly. Now, for each response, practice crafting a follow-up, something that keeps things moving towards a solution.
So if they're into it, I might, express appreciation and outline next steps. If they push back, I might acknowledge their concerns, reframe it, and if they're neutral, I might ask more questions, get clarity.
Right. The episode tells a story about a project manager who totally nailed a stakeholder meeting. People were all over the place, but he was ready because he'd practiced all his responses beforehand.
Another vote for preparation. Okay, what's next?
The cultural flex exercise. This one's all about adaptability.
Cultural flex. Essential in today's world. How do we develop that?
Pick one of your go-to phrases and practice adapting it for 3 different cultures.
Okay, I've got my phrase. What cultures should I be thinking about?
Try ones with different communication styles. How would you say it in a direct culture like the US, an indirect culture like Japan, and a more relationship-focused culture like you see in many Middle Eastern countries?
So I'm taking the same idea and making it fit each culture's way of communicating.
Exactly. You want to be sensitive to those subtle nuances to make sure your message is landing how you want it to.
This is a great exercise. It makes you really think about how the same words can mean different things to different people. What else is there?
This one's fun, the voice variation exercise. It's about how those small changes in your voice can make a big difference in how your suggestions are received.
Voice variation. Like the voice architecture stuff we talked about before.
Yep. This is taking that and putting it into practice. Pick one of your phrases and record yourself saying it in 3 different ways: collaborative, assertive, and inquiring.
So I'm playing around with how I say it. Like collaborative might be warm, assertive might be more direct, and inquiring might be more, curious.
Right. And then listen back. See how each one changes the feel of the message.
I can see how that would be so powerful. Just a small change in your tone can completely change the meaning.
Totally. The episode even mentioned a sales director who used this, and it totally upped her negotiation game. She became so much more aware of how her voice was impacting things.
It's amazing how much control we have over our communication if we just take the time to, practice and pay attention. Okay, what else is there?
Another technique, the real-time reactor.
Real-time reactor. Sounds high-tech, like an app or something.
Not quite. It's a way to train your brain to spot those compromise moments in real time as they're happening.
Like building those compromise muscles.
Exactly. So for your next few meetings, keep a little notebook handy. Jot down every time you could have used a compromise suggestion, even if you didn't actually say it.
So I'm noting those missed opportunities.
Yep. Then after the meeting, take a few minutes to craft the perfect phrase for each one.
This is genius. It's like a post-game analysis for your communication skills.
Exactly. By reflecting on those moments, you'll get better at spotting them in the future.
I love this. It's so actionable. What else?
They suggest keeping a bridge-building journal.
Bridge-building journal. Sounds like a great way to track progress.
Yeah.
And reflect on what's working.
Totally. At the end of each day, jot down 2 things. One situation where you successfully used a compromise suggestion, and one where you wish you had.
So you're celebrating the wins and learning from the missed opportunities.
Right. And for those wish I had moments, come up with 3 ways you could have handled it differently.
Turning what ifs into learning experiences. What a great idea.
Yeah.
Do they have any examples of people using this journaling technique?
Oh, yeah. They told this story about a marketing manager who, totally transformed her negotiation skills. Her team started calling her the compromise queen.
The compromise queen. I love it. It shows that with practice, we can all get really good at this. What's the last technique?
The feedback loop. Practicing with a colleague.
Feedback. Always helpful. How does the feedback loop work?
Find someone you trust and take turns role-playing tough scenarios. Use the compromise suggestions and then give each other feedback right away. What worked, what could be better, all of that.
It's like having a personal communication code.
Exactly. And they even shared how an entire team used this to change their whole communication culture.
Wow, that's amazing. It shows that this can work not just for individuals, but for whole teams.
And even if you're not in charge, you can still be a champion for this.
Yeah.
Just by using these techniques, you can start to shift things in your team, inspire others to do the same.
We can all be agents of change just by changing how we talk to each other.
That's the idea. And that brings us back to that question from the episode. Think about your toughest business relationship right now. Now imagine using all these techniques. What changes? How does the whole dynamic shift?
I'm already picturing it. Something that used to be stressful could become way more positive.
Right. Imagine feeling confident going into those tough conversations, turning disagreements into brainstorming sessions.
And that feeling of knowing you helped create a better work environment. for everyone.
Totally worth it. And you know, this whole deep dive has been a good reminder. Compromise, it's not just about business.
It's about relationships. It's about creating a better workplace. And honestly, it's about making the world a little bit better.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
This deep dive has been incredible. I'm feeling super inspired to embrace compromise and see where it takes me.
That's great to hear. And remember, it's an ongoing thing. This is a skill you can keep refining throughout your career.
And it's worth it.
Yeah.
It has the power to change everything.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground here. So grateful for all the amazing insights in that episode.
It was packed. I can't wait to see you put all this into practice. Become a master of compromise.
Feeling ready for any communication challenge that comes my way.
That's the spirit. Keep practicing, keep experimenting, and keep those compromise muscles strong.
And now, to wrap things up, here's a final thought-provoking question for you from the episode.
Okay, hit me with it.
Think about your most challenging business relationship. The one that just, drains your energy. Now imagine you go into that relationship using everything we've talked about. All these compromise techniques. What happens? Wow, that's a good one. Makes you really think about how this can not just smooth things over, but actually create real change.
It's about seeing compromise not just as a way to get what you want, but as a force for good.
Exactly. Building bridges, understanding each other better, and creating a better world for everyone.
This deep dive has been a game changer. I'm ready to embrace the art of compromise and see what magic happens.
That's what it's all about. Remember, the power to change things, it's in your hands. Embrace compromise and see what amazing things unfold.
Thanks for joining us on the deep dive. It makes you think, what if we could use this stuff, not just in negotiations, but to create a whole culture of compromise, in our teams, companies.
It's a great point. Can you imagine a workplace where this is just how everyone operates, working through differences, finding solutions, all that?
It sounds amazing. No more of those awful meetings, no passive-aggressive emails, just good communication.
And it's not just a fantasy. The episode actually gave some examples of companies that did this, implemented these ideas, and it worked.
Really? What kind of results did they see?
Well, one company, they had way less conflict, and people were happier, more productive. Another one, their teams could make decisions faster. They had this shared language,
Yeah.
Everyone was on the same page.
That's incredible. So it's not just good for individuals, it can change the whole organization.
Right. And even if you're not the boss, you can still make a difference. Just by using these techniques yourself, you can start to change things. Show people there's a better way.
We can all be compromise leaders.
Yeah.
Just by how we talk to each other.
Exactly. And it all comes back to that question the episode asked. Think about your most difficult relationship at work. Now imagine using all this stuff we talked about. What changes?
I'm picturing it now. Something that used to be a total headache could become, something good.
Yeah, imagine feeling ready for those tough conversations, turning disagreements into creative brainstorming sessions.
And knowing that you're part of creating a better workplace, that's a good feeling.
It is. And this whole deep dive, it's been a good reminder. Compromise, it's not just about, getting a deal.
It's about so much more. Relationships, a better work environment, and maybe even making the world a little better.
I like that.
Well, this has been an amazing deep dive. I'm so glad we took the time to really go deep on this.
Me too. Lots of great stuff in here. I'm excited to see what you do with it.
I'm feeling inspired, ready to embrace the art of compromise, see what happens.
That's what it's all about. Remember, the power to change things, it's all yours. Use it well.
Thanks for joining us on the deep dive. We'll see you next time.